I think the actual reason was to penalize Twitter for Gezi Park protests, because social media is very hard to regulate. It is easier to regulate the mainstream media, as we all know. And the media scene is very much pro-government right now. So social media was the only platform for oppositional and critical voices is out on social media. But of course the traffic increased during Twitter ban. So everybody, became curious, they joined, they tried to change DNS settings. So it was like a game for many people. The mainstream media, especially pro-government media outlets, were not prepared to handle the situation. And this very polarized scene was much more crystallized during Soma accident. Of course, the sad part is journalists lost their reflexes to ask the right questions to the politicians. So there is incredible self-censorship among journalists.
What you also have is a rather problematical economic outcome. So there was a lot of unhappiness and madness among the people, and I think it might have been better for some of the figures not to go and try to get some sort of public relations value out of their travels into a disaster zone.
Well, as we know that during Gezi Park protests, there was a big blackout on television stations. And on the first anniversary, the media outlets were prepared. Well, they showed as if they were covering, but they were covering from one aspect only. So there was no critical, analysis or in-depth analysis of what happened during the last 1 year. So I think it was very, sterile. It was very much controlled coverage.
Yeri 10, hatta 20 olsun, 21, 11, 12.
Essentially, by simply being in power and wielding power over his former party, because technically the president does not have a party, the president has continued to behave as prime minister. The prime minister has been acting as the deputy prime minister at best, and the government has been functioning in that particular fashion. In terms of the Turkish constitutional system, this is totally out of the ordinary.
12. Cumhurbaşkanı olarak tayin eden aziz milletime buradan şükranlarımı sunuyorum.
It has produced a large number of new refugees. But secondly, it has introduced a sort of force to the south of Turkey whose method of ruling and conducting politics is simply horrendous and not acceptable to Turks. There is some concerns that there is some domestic organization of this in Turkey itself, which might lead to acts of terrorism. In its Little Washington?
The Inn at Little Washington.
In at Little Washington. I mean, the general impression with which I concur is that Turkey's image has been tarnished as a result of the way the fight against the Islamic State has been handled by the Turkish government. As I tried to explain, some of this might have been unfair, but there are also failures on the part of the Turkish government, both in terms of what it did and in terms of communicating its position and essentially establishing some sort of transparency that has led to these speculations. But clearly, people are beginning to wonder whether Turkey is as reliable an ally as it was thought to be.
Vay ara bebe.